Hi, boys and girls. Good morning and welcome to a new week. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and I hope you had fun celebrating Mother's Day, whether it was with mom or auntie or grandma or sister, anyone that is a special person in your life. I hope you guys had a nice weekend. This week, we're going to learn a little bit about hermit crabs, a little bit about crabs. Most of you know that I love crabs. Today I'm in one of my bedrooms that I have decorated as an ocean. I have my beach house pillow and I also have my favorite crab pillow. So I wanted to sit in here and kind of get me thinking about the summer and the ocean. As I read my story today, it's called Kermit the Hermit. And as I read, I'm going to ask you to press pause, and I want you to make some reflections or some predictions. So as I'm reading, make sure you have a piece of paper and a pencil with you so that you can answer those questions as we go along. Okay? All right, boys and girls. So our story today, like I said, is Kermit the Hermit, and this is written and illustrated by Bill Peet. And if you can see the front cover correctly, I see a crab, I see some starfish, I see some seagulls. So go ahead and just take a moment and press pause and write down a prediction and tell me, what do you think the story is going to be about? Who do you think the characters will be? Who do you think, or what do you think the setting will be? What do you think the problem will be? And what do you think the solution will be? Go ahead and press pause and go ahead and write those down. All right, so I hope you were able to come up with some predictions. As I read the story, I also want you to pay close attention to how the main character in the story changes from the beginning to the end of the story. Here we go. Kermit the Hermit by Bill Peet. In Monterey Bay, there's a jumble of rocks stacked up like a castle across from the dock. The king of this castle, an old crab called Kermit, lived all by himself in a cave like a hermit. There was never a crab who was 1/2 as selfish or 1/10 as mean as this crusty old shellfish. What made Kermit greedy and grumpy that way was the shortage of food everywhere in the bay. For a crab must depend on what he can find, small scraps and tidbits of any old kind. To Kermit each day meant a fight for survival, with every last seagull and crab as a rival. Now, unless it is cured, sometimes greediness grows. Where it finally stops, alas, nobody knows. And before very long, Kermit grabbed everything, from a rusty padlock to a ball of kite string, a broken jackknife, a pair of old shoes, things that a crab couldn't possibly use. And his cave was soon crammed without 1 inch to spare. There was just enough space left for Kermit in there. You can see Kermit up at the top here. Like any old miser, he wanted a lot of something or other, he didn't care what. And he'd have been greedy the rest of his days, and an odd twist of fate hadn't changed Kermit's ways. This remarkable change in old Kermit began with an everyday thing, just a battered tin can. A pork and bean can that had been tossed away far out in the sand dunes that bordered the bay. The crumpled tin lid caught the sun's bright reflection, which caused it to sparkle in every direction. And since the old miser had never been told that bright things that glitter are not always gold, he supposed that it must be some valuable thing, that someone had lost a gold watch or a ring. So he crawled off the rocks and out into the land, then over the hilly broad stretches of sand. And not until Kermit was next to his prize did he realize a trick had been played on his eyes. "Why, you phony tin faker, you," growled the old grump. "Rebel like you should be tossed in a dump." Then just as he turned to start back for the bay, the crab spied a dog who was heading his way. The dog was exploring and trying out smells, sniffing at driftwood and empty clam shells. One sniff at the can told him what had been in it, so he turned to sniff at old Kermit a minute. In one grab, the crab gave the dog a sharp snip on his sensitive nose, and he let out a yip. "That'll teach you," he snapped, "to go sniffing at me." Then he turned himself round to head back for the sea. But the dog made a leap, seized the crab in his jaws by the back of the shell beyond reach of his claws. "Put me down," cried the crab. "Put me down, you big brute, or I'll give you another good pinch on the snoot." But the dog paid no heed to old Kermit's command. He set to work digging a hole in his sand. The crab guessed at once it was not just a cave. It was going straight down, so it must be a grave. "What a horrible end," Kermit said with a groan, "to be buried alive like a worthless old bone." And just then, as the dog dropped the crab in the hole, a boy happened by with a long fishing pole. "You old hound," he scolded, "what a mean thing to do! Now how would you like it if I buried you? You're too nice a dog to do something like that." And then he scooped up the crab in his tattered straw hat, trotted off down the beach to the edge of the sea, and flipping his hat, he set old Kermit free. And with a sigh of relief, the old crab went his way, on back to his castle of rocks in the bay. If it weren't for the boy, he just had to admit there'd be no tomorrow. That would have been it. "I'll reward my young friend," said Kermit. "That's what, with all my life savings, everything I've got." But things like old shoes or a broken jackknife could never repay him for saving my life. The ideal reward would be a new bike. There's something I'm sure that a small boy would like. Yet how can a crab ever buy a bicycle without any money, not even a nickel? He pondered the problem the whole afternoon, then far into the night by the light of the moon. But try as he might, alas and alack, he thought of no way he could pay the boy back. So I want you to think for just a minute, how would you be able to maybe pay the boy back? How would you be able, if you were the crab, what do you think the crab could do to pay the boy back? I want you to press pause and go ahead and write that down. All right, so I hope you came up with some good ideas. We'll see what happens. The next afternoon, as he crawled on the rocks, Kermit spotted the boy on the end of the docks. The very same boy the old crab could tell that by the faded striped shirt and the tattered straw hat. He had been lulled to sleep by the warm summer breeze with his fishing pole propped on his patched trouser knees. I might help him to catch a big fish, Kermit thought, if there's any big fish here around to be caught. Of course, he must first find the boy's baited hook, so he scrambled out into the bay for a look. And just a few yards from the pilings he found it with a school of small minnows all swimming around it, lightly gripping the line just below the lead weight. Kermit tiptoed along, gently dragging the bait. If he happened to give it to the least little jerk, the boy would reel in and his plan wouldn't work. So Kermit kept on till he came to a ledge, where he stopped to peer cautiously over the edge. Then, reaching as far as he could with his claws, he lowered the bait towards a halibut's jaws. The big fish took a look, and in one mighty scoop, both the worm and the hook disappeared in one gloop. And when he found he'd been hooked, he took off like a streak, and the line, which was really too flimsy and weak, suddenly snapped from the force of the shock somewhere behind Kermit back near the dock. He was on his own now, with no one to help, and off he went flying through tangles of kelp. Up over the waves he went flippity-flip, straight out of the bay on a wild, foamy trip. Then somewhere far out in the broad rolling sea, the furious fish finally fought his way free. And way out in the deep water, the crab couldn't crawl. About all he could do was let himself fall. and Kermit went tumbling down in slow motion into the dark, gloomy depths of the ocean, to the soft, sandy floor where he lit with a plunk near the place where an old pirate ship had been sunk. The huge hull had been smashed, all the sails ripped and tattered, and in every direction the cargo had scattered. "I imagine," said Kermit, "I'm not safe down here. There's much more to this place than the weird atmosphere. Some creatures were watching, the old crab could tell, but the cold, creepy feeling that ran through his shell, crouching flat in the sand, he peered into the dark. He suddenly saw it, a monstrous blue shark, and as the shark wheeled around for a head-on attack, Kermit spied an old chest that was open a crack. He got there a second before the shark did, and in a wild scramble squeezed under the lid. Now pushing hard with his snout, the big fish tried his best to force up the lid of the heavy old chest. He lunged with a fury, and all the brute strength of his broad fins and tail, and his 20-foot length, but the lid's double hinges were solid with rust, and a century's thickness of barnacle crust. So the crab stayed within while the shark stayed without, and all he got for his pains was a badly bruised snout. And he finally turned tail, then away he went tearing, in search of a school of sardines or some herring. So the crab is inside of the chest. And what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and press pause, and I'd like for you to write down on your paper, what do you predict is inside of this chest? And I want you to use the sentence starter, I predict. So go ahead and take a few moments to do that. All right, so I hope you were able to make some predictions of what you think is in the chest with the crab. Let's see. Not until he was sure the big shark was long gone did Kermit look down to see what he sat on. The old chest was filled pretty near to the top with a heap of gold pieces that made his eyes pop. "How strange," Kermit muttered. "No one's found it before. It can't be much more than 2 miles from shore. But anyway, all this gold treasure's mine now. And if I just haul it back to my castle somehow, with a coin in each claw," he set out for the bay, with his life in great danger each step of the way. Not only the shark, other big fish as well, can easily bite through a crab's crusty shell. To avoid being caught by these crab-hungry enemies, he scuttled behind the dense clumps of anemones. Here the deep shadows were mostly blue-green, so a bluish-green crab could barely be seen. Every day for 3 months, Kermit made the round trip, returning each time with 2 coins in his grip. To make room for the treasure, he emptied his cave of the rubble he'd gone to such trouble to save. And after stacking the gold into one gleaming pile, his crusty face cracked even a satisfied smile. He was thinking of all that great pleasure and fun such a treasure would bring to a certain someone. Then he crawled from his cave for a view of the bay, in hopes that he'd find his young friend there that day. He's actually happy now. But since the dock was deserted, he looked towards the shore, where he spied some small boys, 6 or more, tall ones and scrawny ones, one who was fat, but not one of them wore a striped shirt or straw hat. But his young friend might wear something else altogether, since the winter had come with its cold, foggy weather. But anyways, Kermit thought, what could I do? Just walk up and say, "Hey, here's a present for you." Then he heaved such a deep and most sorrowful sigh, he attracted a pelican roosting nearby. "Now cheer up, old fellow," the bird began, smiling as only one pelican can. "If you've got a problem, please let me suggest you tell it to me. Get the thing off your chest." No one could resist such a friendly big smile, so the crab told his tale to him after a while, showed all of the gold when he came to the end, then tried to describe his heroic young friend. "That boy," said the bird, "is familiar to me.
Some people watch birds. I watch people, you see. The lad has 2 sisters and also 1 brother. And then I'm quite certain a father and mother. They live in a very small 3-room red shack in the south part of town besides the train track. I could carry the treasure there beside my beak, but I'd swallow it all, for my beak has a leak. So if you would like, I'll just give you a lift. Besides, you're the one to deliver the gift. And so, with the 2 gold pieces tight in his grip, Kermit took off on his first flying trip. Across the broad bay in one breathtaking swoop, away through the dense fog, as thick as pea soup. By the time Kermit got there, up the nerve to look down, the big bird was soaring out over the town. Below was a small cottage, painted barn red, and beside the train track, as the pelican said, that poor people lived there was easy to see, for it was the only house without a TV. So all of these poles indicate TVs, and there's this one house over here that doesn't have a TV pole. And as the pelican came to a fluttering stop alongside the chimney, he let the coins drop. And they fell to the bottom, the 2 friends could tell, for the pot-bellied stove went kerbong like a bell. And then inside the house, great excitement broke out. "Why, it's gold! It's real gold!" they heard somebody shout. And the family ran out to find what it could be, but discovered the fog had rolled in from the sea. A ghostly white curtain closed in everywhere, so they never caught sight of whoever was there. The high-flying crab in the pelican's beak brought the family a fortune inside of a week. Soon they had a TV set and all sorts of toys, such as dolls for their daughters and bikes for the boys. All the rest of the gold, which was quite an amount, they set safely aside in a savings account. For the wise father said, "It is not every day that a fortune is dropped down our chimney that way." The end.
All right, boys and girls, I hope that you enjoyed our story, Kermit the Hermit. I want you to take just a minute and write down how Kermit changed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, because at the beginning I think he was kind of and I want you to write that down on your paper. So go ahead and press pause and write down how he changed from the beginning to the end of the story. All right, so I hope that you guys had a minute to write down how he changed. What I noticed is that at the beginning of the story, Kermit was grumpy and grouchy and lonely. And by the end of the story, Kermit was happy and he was giving, and he seemed like he had really accomplished something and was really proud of himself. So I hope you wrote down something similar to that. At the end of the day, I really like this story because it's kind of about kindness. And if you think about it, the little boy was just walking along the beach, minding his own business, and he saw the crab was in trouble, and he picked the crab up and he returned it to the ocean where crabs should be. And that's actually what we call integrity. And that's doing the right thing when no one is watching. So I really hope that you can take that lesson from this story and use it in your daily life. And always remember to be kind and do the right thing, even when people aren't watching. Okay? So I hope that you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for our next crab story this week. All right, have a great day.